Let me turn this over to the folks who really know something. But let me thank you again for being here and make it through the whole day with us. Thank you.
Well, good morning. My name is Ginger Gossman, and this is my colleague Rex Peebles. We are really thrilled to see you here. I'm sure you recognize me from all my emails, so thank you for responding to them by coming to the conference. So what we're going to talk about this morning is really give you a brief overview of the goal and of the guidelines. So if you have not dug into your beautiful red folder yet, you'll find the guidelines are in there. And we're really hopeful that this will become a living document so that as you figure out, like Dr. Gardner said, if you figure out what you're going to be doing on your campus and you have some ideas that might work in other regions or at other institutions, we'd love to hear those ideas so we can share them. So again, we really want to thank you for taking the time and the staff time especially to invest in this conference. We started on these guidelines probably 7 or 8 months ago based on feedback from the field related to this goal. So as a reminder, the third goal of 60 by 30 Techs, the marketable skills goal, reads that by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions of higher education will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. So the first target of this goal is focused on creating a process for identifying those skills. And part of this process is that they will be updated regularly, as Dr. Gardner mentioned as well. So this is an important component of the goal. Our Commissioner Paredes, often refers to a book called Industries of the Future, which explains that we don't know what jobs will exist in the next 15 years. It's very possible that the skills we're teaching students now will absolutely be needed in the next 15 years. But what will those job titles be? We really don't know. Think about the job title of a data scientist that you see frequently now in job ads. That title didn't exist 10 years ago, but the skills associated with that job, you have been teaching those to students for a really long time. It's just a matter of repackaging. That's what we want to do as position students so they can quickly repackage themselves for whatever jobs are going to be created. So the first target is really the impetus behind the conference today. So our goal for today is that you'll take what you learn in the breakout sessions and the training sessions and take them back to your institutions and really start this process, codify this process for your colleagues. Now, the second target associated with the goal is about placement after graduation. And I just want to mention that this target is something the coordinating board has been collecting and reporting for over 15 years. Since we launched the plan in 2015, the marketable skills goal has been quite a point of interest. The first target, as we just reviewed, is the main focus of this, of the people who are really expressing an interest in the marketable skills goal. So some institutions have looked at this goal and thought, wow, this is a chance for us to really highlight how we're unique from other campuses and what we're offering our students. And other institutions have looked at this goal askance and wondered, what is it exactly that you're trying to do with higher education? Regardless of the response, institutions and stakeholders have requested more information from the coordinating board on how to implement this goal. In response, we developed these guidelines, and again, we focus the breakout or the training sessions on the most commonly asked questions. So the guidelines provide information on multiple facets of the goal, including the overview, as well as details on how to get started. So the guidelines also include information about the coordinating board and our role in helping you implement this goal. As a whole, the guidelines are designed to address what we call the awareness gap. The awareness gap describes the phenomenon where college graduates have skills of value in the workforce, but they're not really aware of what those skills are. I know that sounds kind of strange, but think about your first job. Think about your first resume. Did it really reflect what you were capable of doing at that time? So really, the marketable skills goal is designed so that students can have a place where they can look at what they've really learned in your programs and how that might apply to them, as Dr. Gardner said, marketing themselves to potential employers. So in particular, the breakout sessions, the training sessions are focused on the section in the guidelines called Getting Started, if you want to take a closer look. So we began learning about your progress on the marketable skills goal in 2016, and in that year, we asked your institutional research folks to tell us through our accountability system, how are you doing? What are you doing? And we asked for a narrative on what was happening on your campuses, and we learned a lot from that process. In fact, some of what we learned really helped inform what we put in the guidelines. So we also started to dig a little bit deeper in the last accountability data collection, and we asked a question, how many of your, give us a percentage, how done do you think you are? What kind of progress are you making? And we learned a lot from that process too, mostly that we need to improve the question that we ask to get better data. But I will say that even this, just having this question, a very, very simple question, it really did prompt a lot of good conversations between our staff and your staff who are reaching out trying to get clarification on what it was we were actually asking. So these were the responses that we got in terms of what percentage of your programs have identified marketable skills. We had sort of bifurcated. We had some who said, we're not really there yet, and we had others who said, oh yes, we're done. So we're really interested in learning from you in the future what that means. What does that mean to you? Again, we do need to refine our question, but it was really interesting to get at least some handle on what the data were telling us. So the first part of the guidelines really ties the goals together. We've been trying to improve our messaging about how 60 by 30 text is designed so that the goals really are integrated. They are interdependent. So 60 by 30, or the educated population, that is the center goal. But it's the other three goals that will get us there by 2030. Completing a degree ensures that students will gain full exposure to the marketable skills available to them through your programs. And again, students who can effectively market themselves to potential employers can secure employment with competitive salaries. Having a competitive salary puts a student in a position to pay off their student debt without undue burden on themselves or their families. Student debt ties back to completion because student debt is a tool. It's a tool for students to pay for college so that they can go ahead and complete that degree. We know from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that going to college is not what gives a student an economic lift. It is completing college that gives them that upper hand in the economy. So the longest section of the guidelines is dedicated to sharing ideas on how institutions can get started with implementation. We first recommend that institutions engage their career services departments. So by show of hands, how many career services folks are here? That's really, thank you for coming. So the coordinating board, as Dr. Gardner mentioned, we've been around for 52 years. This is the first time in our agency's history that we have engaged your community, the career services community, because it wasn't part of our traditional mission. But with 60 by 30 text, we really recognize that our traditional mission is not serving the students in the best way possible. We're not meeting our potential as an agency for what we could do for students, and so we're trying to change that with this plan as well. So I've spoken to a number of career services groups in the last year and a half, and all of them are really excited about being part of this process. So one of the training sessions today from University of Houston peers, from your peers, is going to be talking about how you can integrate your career services people into your process for identifying marketable skills. So some of the other sessions, which again, I really hope that you took to heart that you need to divide and conquer to be exposed to all the information today, because the sessions do not repeat. There's 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So you're going to have to send off your peers in different directions so you can get exposed to everything. Because we also have a session on how to take your program learning outcomes to turn them into marketable skills. We have a session on how to engage a variety of stakeholders who may not want to come to the table, and how to bring everyone feel included into the conversation. And we have a session on how to take labor market information or job postings data or just job postings and backwards design that into identifying your marketable skills. Now, again, all of these are guidelines. They're all suggestions on how you can get started on your campus. We are not telling you what you have to do. We're giving you ideas on what you could do. So reaching the marketable skills goal, again, as Dr. Gardner said, this is really, it's the most squishy of the goals. So we really try when we strategically plan at the coordinating board to identify goals and targets that are measurable. And the marketable skills goal, in terms of measurability, has great potential, but at present as the least metric. We don't really have anything solidly formed. We will probably keep asking you in the accountability system, how are you doing? But achieving this goal is really going to require a lot of cooperation on your campuses, between your campuses, with the Texas Workforce Commission, with the Texas Education Agency. It's really going to be an all-hands-on-deck effort. So, again, seeing all of you here is really heartening to us, that you're interested in this goal and that you're really wanting to dig in and help us accomplish it. I just want to stress that faculty are a really important part of this process. And hopefully, as you engage them on your campuses, it will alleviate their concerns about what the marketable skills goal is trying to do to higher ed. We really are very passionate about your missions to create students who are well-rounded, who will be civically engaged. And we do not see the marketable skills goal as deterring from that. We see it as adding to that. Many of the skills that employers are looking for, we are absolutely positive. We are confident that you are teaching your students those skills. Your liberal arts majors, your humanities majors, they are incredibly valuable to the marketplace. Maybe they just need a little help explaining that to people who might hire them. So the marketable skills goal, there is a variety of stakeholders who are interested, and we don't have a really clear way of contacting everybody who wants to learn what we're doing at the coordinating board or to learn about your efforts. So we have created a list for you to join if you would like to get updates on marketable skills, especially those of you who are in career services, because there is no statewide group of career services, so it's harder for us to contact you. So please sign up, and we'll send you updates as we have them. And we'll be sharing the marketable skills guidelines through that process as well. So we thank you for your time, and we are here to answer any questions you have this morning.
I'm sorry, I do not have a question. I was trying to wave someone down.
Oh.
Well, it worked.
Well, let me ask you something. How many of you have heard us talk about the marketable skills goal before today? Okay, so to me that looks about half of the hands. So there are quite a few of you who haven't really heard us talk about this in detail before. Okay. What are you hearing on your campuses about the marketable skills goal? Okay, now there a hand shot right up.
I actually had a different question.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, is this initiative Texas's response to the high college debt in the nation that we've been facing for some time now? Or is it part of that?
Well, I think it's partially a response to debt because we do believe that if a student can complete a degree and they can then get a job, there are two things that can happen with that. One is the more timely their degree is, the less excess hours they have with their degree, then the less debt they'll accumulate. So I think it's all connected. And the marketable skills goal is certainly connected to that in the sense that we believe that a student goes through college, they get a degree or a certificate, and when they complete, there should be some reasonable expectation that they can get a job with that degree or certificate, or at least in some closely related field. And so, one quick comment about marketable skills is that all along and this really goes back to the inception of this goal with the Higher Education Strategic Planning Committee, and that is that we have believed that all along students are taught marketable skills, that they have been, they are, and they will be in the future, but there really is that, as Ginger identified, sort of the awareness gap, but the sense that students don't necessarily know the marketable skills, and if they do, they've learned those marketable skills now in the language of student learning outcomes, perhaps, but they've not necessarily learned them in the language that business and industry uses. So sometimes we think this may be simply a translation issue, if you will, between the language that higher education uses and the language that business and industry uses. But we also believe that it's certainly that students have learned these things all along, and it's a question of identifying, but it's certainly all of the goals of the higher education strategic plan are connected to each other.
I just want to add, I wish I'd mentioned earlier, but we also have to find a way to work with industry. So even the example I mentioned with my daughter, that company understood the value of people with that background. Not all companies do, and so we have to figure out a way to work with industry and help them learn to think about who they hire in a broader fashion. And that's more challenging. There are companies out there like that. In the book I was mentioning that was written about the Stanford graduates, the guy made the note that many companies understood the importance of people with a broader range of skills, but they didn't follow up on it, and other companies did a good job of that. And I think that's particularly an area where people in career services could help us. But even those of you that are on the faculty that work regularly with some companies, try to explain that to them as well.
Quick question about the difference that you all see between undergraduate versus graduate programs and how you're defining marketable skills, especially for the graduate programs. Do you see any differences?
Well, I think there could certainly be differences in the skills that they learn, although I would think that in a lot of cases, the skills may be the same or the knowledge may be the same, but certainly at much more depth. And they may be very, very different as well. And, it's kind of an interesting exercise because a lot of CTE programs, and I think this is also true of a lot of graduate programs, both master's and doctoral programs, that they tend to be better defined, if you will, in terms of what it is that students are supposed to know when they exit, so that a lot of times we think that the marketable skills are already there. But again, I think part of this may be a question of translation. Are we using the same language that an employer might recognize so that the student knows that difference as well? And the other thing I would encourage you to do is to think about the skills that you're teaching in the course of your program, but you don't necessarily identify those as student learning outcomes in your program. Many of you have often heard me give the example of statistics. All of my degrees are in political science. And as a result, I took a lot of statistics. And the statistics I took equipped me to do a lot of things other than political science. No one told me that at the time, because my statistics was all about studying primarily voting behavior, but also political parties, interest groups, and so on, and even some comparative government work. But at the same time, I could have done a lot of other things with those statistical skills that I learned. And as you progress through undergraduate to graduate school, those skills can get both broadened and also deeper as well. But I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Okay, I think I just have more of a comment. Nationally, the liberal arts groups have been talking about marketable skills. We realize that for a long time, we've talked about, well, we're not our students, it's STEM, it's the sciences. But the conversations have been changing nationally in terms of we have got to promote ourselves and really highlight the skill sets that our liberal arts students and humanities have and that they gain. So I think this really dovetails with the national conversation that we've been having. And I think my other observation is the importance. I come from a accredited program, a program that is very competency-based, social work. That's my discipline, my background. And so having written lots of accreditation reports to show our competencies, I think that it's an important conversation for faculty. I'm a dean of a college, is to have that conversation with faculty about our relationship with the external constituents, which you're talking about, the labor market. And really, I really like the comment of speaking the same language and translating what we are doing to the language that's out in the market, because I think it's there, it's very clear. And so I think my perception is it's a conversation to have on a regular basis with faculty, and we're having that conversation in the arts and the humanities particularly, to say, okay, we're doing this, and our students are doing amazing jobs, and they're ending up in amazing careers, but let's speak the same language. But that involves us going outside of our campuses and actually reaching out into our communities to find out what the labor force, what the workforce is looking for, and how we link those together. So I think it's more of a comment for me, but I think that this really dovetails with the national conversation that we're having in the liberal arts in general.
And just to expand on that, I believe that you're right that the conversation is happening in the liberal arts. I think it's happening in the career technical workforce. So my question is, how do you see those two? I don't think it can happen in either or. How do we help to promote those conversations between those particular groups of faculty? Because it's not just one discipline. So any ideas on how you intend to approach that, or any ideas of how we could bring those conversations to fruition?
Well, one of the sessions that we'll have this afternoon, before I try to answer that, Mary, there's a way over there. So one of the sessions we have this afternoon is about an effort that was made by a group of disciplines that got together at four-year institutions and tried to identify marketable skills within those. But I do think it might be helpful if on your own campus you have some cross-conversation, if you will, between the two, because I think students in STEM, for example, often learn soft skills that we don't necessarily identify, and students in the traditional liberal arts, including both science and math degrees, oftentimes learn hard skills that we also don't oftentimes identify. And it may be that the cross conversation between the two sides of the house, if you will then help identify those a little bit better.
So, Ginger, you asked what we're hearing from the institutions. And so from the ones I work with, they've sort of viewed this almost as a test from the coordinating board to the institution and trying to understand what it is the coordinating board wants. From what I've heard, it's not a list of marketable skills, but demonstrating that you've gone through the process of identifying them and communicating them with the students.
You mean in terms of what we would want you to report to us?
Right.
That is correct. We are not looking for a list of skills. We are really wanting to know how you're progressing in creating and implementing a process to identify them, because that's lined up with the first target.
But it would also be nice if you would tell us what marketable skills you had actually identified, by the way. And part of that, I think, is because that can be shared with a whole lot of other people.
Now, isn't that the case for new programs?
Yes.
So now, for new programs, you do have to identify the marketable skills.
I was just curious if you could speak on how the Occupational Skills Award, if at all, relates to this initiative and how it can support it. And it may not.
Well, that's a great question, because originally that was called the Marketable Skills Award, and we changed the name to avoid confusion. That award, I will say, is not counted as part of the completion goal. But in terms of marketable skills, I I think if you really want to position your students to get a competitive job, it would certainly be worth the time to invest for those students. What do you think, Ray?
Well, I think that most of your occupational skills awards are the courses that are in those awards are typically embedded in other either level 1 or level 2 certificates or an associate of applied science degree for which you would identify marketable skills. So I don't know that we need to separate that completely. And it may not be true for an advanced award that would go outside or above and beyond the associate of applied science degree or even a level 2 certificate. But at the same time, I think if you identify your marketable skills within your certificate and degree programs, you'll be in good shape. So.
Hi. In reading the literature and in the discussion today, I hear a lot of talk about soft versus hard skills. Has the coordinating board or any of the groups affiliated, since lost in translation seems to be the theme of this, reimagined talking about soft skills versus hard skills as not calling them that? Like I've heard people refer to soft skills as critical skills or other. If we're trying to talk to industry and make sure that they think that these things are marketable, that soft skills sounds like not the way to go.
Well, I certainly wouldn't object to calling them whatever you want to call them. Although I think it's kind of interesting that historically, when you've asked business and industry, I think David pointed out earlier that at some point we need to, and we're trying to figure out how to do this, is to have a long and sustained conversation with business and industry about these issues. But historically, if you've asked business and industry what they want out of their employees, then typically what you hear is they want communications, critical thinking, and teamwork, problem solving, play well together, that kind of thing. And so they themselves have often emphasized what we would think of as soft skills, if you will. And I'm not real sure I really appreciate the term in a way, because critical thinking may be the hardest of all of the skills to try to master. And in fact, problem solving and critical thinking are not necessarily the same thing. There's good problem solving involves critical thinking, but as a mathematician once put it to me, all mathematics is critical thinking. And I don't know that there's any critical thinking involved in 2 + 2 = 4. It's a given in the mathematics world. So there are two different things going on there to some degree, but it is interesting that you don't get a lot of feedback from business and industry about hard skills. And oftentimes they tend to think that students do have those and they come out with them, and I think that's by and large true, by the way. And what they are not well aware of is the soft skills, or whatever it is that we want to term them. And so we've actually had some discussion about naming them something else, but it still seems that the most popular nomenclature is trying to draw that distinction between soft and hard, and I think there's a fine line between the two quite often, by the way. And I'm not sure how you are successful with only one. That if you want to be successful, you need at least some of both of those things.
Good morning. Dan Corris from Del Mar College down in Corpus Christi. Question is, are we going to put the marketable skills into an inventory that way we're all looking on the same page? And in fact, along with that inventory comes continuing education. One of the programs that we have at Del Mar College is truck driving. Truck driving is number 1 or number 2 in most workforce areas for LMI. It's, I think, rated number in 27 out of 50 states, it's number 1, truck driving. 200 hours later, they get a certificate. It's got to be recognized by the state of Texas. Soon there's going to be a federal mandate saying that all truck drivers have to be recognized by at a federal level so that we all have the same standard. However, we don't get credit for truck drivers going through and getting a certificate. And oh, by the way, my persistence rate is 99% and my placement rate is 95%. So where does continuing education fit into the 60/30 program? Using truck driving as an example.
So you said 200 hours, right? Which I think is, from my experience, that's about right for CDL. What we do include in 60 by 30 is those coordinating board approved programs that are 360 hours or more of continuing education. But it is true that we have not and do not include the others, although that may be something that we ought to look at. Because in terms of putting people to work and people finding gainful employment, then that is often the result of exactly those programs, which is exactly what they're designed to do. So that may be something that we want to look at then.
Thank you for listening. We are going to move on in the agenda.